Alrighty, this is Mark with Southern Custom CC. Thanks for joining us. Here we have it. We have the Pimped Out 50cc 4-stroke hyperbike. As you can see, that's the standard, 49cc generic motor that we had on the first video. Pull start. Threw in a bobber light. 13-inch ape hangers. The bobber light is controlled off of the on-off battery pack. As you can see, we have the MZ pipe reworked and welded to fit. The NT carb, typical pocket bike transmission. And I actually ended up going with a 60-tooth rear sprocket. That's going to give me a much better ratio. I'm not looking for top speed. I'm looking for getting speed up quickly. You know, because I'd like to rev this thing, especially since it's a little bit louder with that exhaust, and people are going to turn and look and check it out. And if you're not going anywhere, it's kind of embarrassing. So I decided to go with the 60-tooth, and it pulls nicely up a hill. So let's start this baby up. So as you can see, that baby just fires right up. It has a lot of rear torque and sounds mean. I have 100 jet in that NT carb, and I think I may actually go down to a 95 because it's right in between. So we'll see if it's a 95, 97, but right now it's 100. I don't think I'm going to stick with it, but it has nice pull all range. So there it is, my Pimped Out 50cc 4-stroke hyperbike. Thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe. This is Mark. Make sure you follow along. We're going to have some great videos coming up. Take care. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do to pimp out this 50cc 4-stroke is we're going to replace the stock carb and the stock air filter for an NT carb and a high performance air filter to get better breathability, better mileage, better response, overall better performance. So this one's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Alright, so as you can see, we're going to want to keep this. We're going to want to leave that installed. But you can either use the stock gasket or with the NT carb adapter, you also receive a NT carb adapter gasket. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to use this. The reason why you want to keep this is because that square inlet is a lot bigger than that circular inlet. So we need to keep that for a reduction. So we're going to line those up. The curve with the curve. And then since you've taken out your bolts, which hold the carb on, we're going to need to replace those with some M5 20mm screws. Voila, you have your NT carb adapter set up. Next, we're going to take off the Punisher air intake. And we're going to swap that out with a pocket bike air velocity. I tend to like these better than the CNC ones you get from gas bike. The inlet is much more drastic and narrow, and it shoots directly in there. So in order to make this work, we're going to actually have to cut out this webbing. So very gingerly, just cut off the webbing, leave the circles, because you're going to need those for your screws. There you go. You're going to want to match that up. And also you're going to need to keep this, because if you were to put the velocity stack straight on, you have a nut there that holds your choke together, and that brushes up against there, and this is really, really hard to move and close. So you're going to need that spacer, and that's what this is. So you line those up. Alrighty, so now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to Dremel off the excess threading so that we're able to access our petcock. Now if you can see, it is a very clear and direct shot with these PT pocket bike velocity stacks. There we go, easy peasy. Just double check that they're tight. You want an air leak. Okay. Double check we're tight here. on it goes. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and take off the cap and the insides so that I can easily have access to all that when I'm ready to reinstall the throttle cable. That way I'm not trying to remove it all with that small space. I always like to double check that the screws are secure and tight. Open up your inlet screw slightly. Alright, we took off the rubber gasket. It sits far enough back to where that's not going to matter. There we go. Now we're going to install our offset intake, the 45-degree angle K&N style performance air intake, and this is a 45 millimeter. Voila, there you have it. We now have the NT carb adapter, the NT carb, and a velocity stack, as well as a 45-degree offset performance intake. So now we're going to attach the insides of the NT carb, have the throttle come in, and we're all set. Alrighty, so now it's time to discuss what I'm going to do with this bike. Now that we have the intake set up, I'm going to go ahead and remove these fenders. I really never have liked using fenders. If you've ever watched my videos, I will install the fenders on the bike, but I immediately remove them before I sell them because they do pose a hazard if they're not well maintained. Even though I do trust these fenders a little bit more than most, I'm still going to remove them. And then we're going to go ahead and look at this baby for some ape hangers. Going to go ahead and take off the throttle, the brake. I imagine I'm going to need to save this brake cable for another bike and get a custom fit longer one if we put some ape hangers up. I'm also going to probably have to elongate that kill switch. But that's what we're going to do. So let's get to it. Alrighty, so we got the ape hangers on. I just wanted to take note that these handlebars that came off of the bike stock has a 1-inch diameter. So if you were to buy ape hangers that are not 1 inch, have the 1-inch bulge there, you will need to buy shims to make that 1 inch. So let's keep it going. Alrighty, so I've actually lucked out. I didn't have to elongate the kill switch wires. It's just long enough. and I'm actually going to have just a little bit more than I need. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to thread back in the throttle assembly. We're going to leave it right in the middle, but I know we're going to have to adjust it. So that's just the process of tuning. Alrighty, so now that we have the NT carb installed along with the velocity stack and the performance air filter, our next big bump in performance is going to come from our exhaust. Now, this is the standard down tube exhaust that the kit comes with. The only other easy change of exhaust that you can get is the flexible poo-poo pipe. Those run about 30 bucks depending on where you get it. And essentially, you'll match up this just like a standard install, but the down pipe is flexible so you can mold it, and it just curves around here, and you'll have your expansion chamber sitting back here, and that's where you'll fasten it, and the exhaust will be shooting out back here. Now it does give it a low kind of poop 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 sound to it, which is nice. It does add a little bit of extra breathability, power. I haven't really noticed any, but it does sound a lot cooler than this normal stock exhaust. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to try and get some more horsepower. So we are going to take this off. And we're going to install an MZ pipe. Okay, and as you can see, when we try and install it, it's not going to fit. Okay, because this is made for the standard bike setup where the tube is on the other side of the down tube for the bike, whereas on the inside there's plenty of space and it sits up nicely up on top, but this just doesn't line up. So we're gonna have to make 2 cuts and 2 welds. Our first cut is going to be right here, and our second cut is going to be right here. So what we are going to do is make our first cut here, because what we want to do is we want to get the eyelets lined up on the engine. Now as you can see, these are pretty level, they're pretty straight. Now on the engine, they're off to a side. So what we have to do is we're going to splice here, tilt that over so that the eye hole's here and here, and then we're going to weld it. After that, we are going to come right here just as soon as it starts to straighten out, and we're going to do a level cut there, and we're going to move this piece out. So as you can see, it's wide down here, but it's narrow up here. What we essentially want is this even spacing from here to up here. So as you can see, we're going to try and want to line that exhaust up with the line of my finger. So we have to tilt this out. Cut here, line out, cut here, and tilt that up. So what I suggest doing at this point is cutting there, and then getting some masking tape. You'll want to screw this into the engine, get some masking tape when it's lined up, and put in your new piece right here, and then tape that. And then get your pipe in, fit it there, and tape that so that it all lines up. Then you'll unscrew that, you'll slowly take off your tape, and then you'll tack weld it until you come back, you line it up, make sure it's where it's at, and then you'll fill in those welds. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to check it out. Hopefully it'll give it more power. Alrighty, so we're back. Went ahead and made our cut there, just did a quick weld, quick sand on it, just so you can kind of highlight the points of where it is, where the cuts are. Once again, that's tilted up slightly, and that's bent off to the side. It's a little more straighter. as you can see. So now I'm just going to come right in. And we are going to slip that baby on. All right, so we're going to screw in that other one. And as you can see, it clears it and matches up, and it shoots right down along parallel with the bar of this bike. So that's going to sit very, very nicely. All right, next stage is to double check, make sure we don't have any pinhole leaks. We're going to spray paint that, finish mounting it, and we'll start her up. Alrighty, so I just went out for the first ride with the MZ pipe, the NT carb, the performance air filter. I bumped it up to an 80 jet, but I already know I'm going to need to bump that up to an 85 or a 90. But one thing, I still have the 44 tooth sprocket on there, and when I got back from a 2-mile ride, I'm smelling the clutch. So I just loosened this up. I'm about to peel it off for the first time after 2 miles in a fresh clutch, and I smell it. I can tell I'm already going to open that up and that thing's going to be burnt. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to change out that 44 tooth. I'm going to put on a 52 tooths rear sprocket to get a little bit more torque. I'm going to probably lose maybe about 3 miles an hour on the top speed, but I'm going to get that low end torque, which I think is going to save me from having to keep replacing this clutch. So yep, that thing is toasted. Look, it's gone up there. Look how thin that is. This is 2 miles off of a fresh clutch. So instead of having to keep replacing that, I'm going to put a larger rear sprocket on to get some more torque, and I'm going to replace that clutch, put on a new clutch. So after I do that, then I'm going to bump up to an 85 and possibly a 90 on that NT jet, and then we'll do the final video. Alrighty, just wanted to give a quick note on these bobber lights. Really love these. A lot of people have asked me about them, so I thought I'd just jump in here and talk about it real quick. So these are the standard $30 bobber lights that you can pick up off of eBay, Amazon, or any other Chinese drop site. The mounting brackets that it typically comes with will not mount with these cruisers. They are typically designed to mount with forks that have suspension in them, with like the mountain bike suspension forks. Since this is a cruiser fork, it's not going to fit with the brackets that it comes with. So you kind of have to jerry-rig your own setup in here. As you can see, I've measured out a bracket, bent it into shape, and it holds it and secured with hose clamps, as well as rubber under the hose clamp so I don't scratch up my handlebars. And with these lights,
alrighty, well, we've come to the end. I just want to say a big thank you to you for watching.
Positive,
please like and subscribe.
Well high beams.
Hopefully you enjoyed this segment on
so
Pimp
white
My
is typically
54
positive,
stroke.
green's
We're going to be
negative,
doing the 2-stroke
brown's
next, as well as a couple other comparison videos. So
but what I really want to talk about
have fun,
are
and
these
be safe, everybody.
12 volt
Thanks a lot for
battery
watching.
cases.
This is Mark with Southern
Now
Custom
these are just
CC.
a few bucks.
Be sure to like and subscribe.
And what you do is you put in 8 AA batteries, and you got your own little case with an on-off switch. And you just have a simple positive and negative going into the positive and negative, and it's all controlled by a switch. Now, since I consider these lights more of show and not necessarily for practical use, even though they can be used for practical use, I personally consider them for show. So it doesn't bother me that I have a battery pack here, which I will eventually need to get into and replace the batteries. And to do that, I just clip off these zip ties, switch out the batteries, put some new ones in, and zip tie it back up, and I'm good to go. Now, of course, you can go with the standard battery, which will power these lights no problem, but these are pretty heavy. They fit just barely in there, but it does also give it a bulky look. These battery packs are more sleek and give it a nice slim profile right here. very ergonomic. So that's essentially what I do. And beautiful, beautiful.